Chapter 1. The Unexpected Tenant. The barren expanse of Kestrin. 7 stretched endlessly before Eli Grant, the hazy atmosphere obscuring the distant horizon. The desolate scrapyard planet wasn't much to look at, an endless graveyard of forgotten machines and abandoned starships, but for those like Eli, it was a lifeline. Scavengers roamed the endless fields of wreckage, hoping to find treasures among the trash. Eli had made a habit of avoiding places like this after his piloting days ended, but desperation brought him back. His Iron Warden-class shuttle, a patchwork of salvaged parts and duct-taped miracles, hovered above the surface before descending to a sandy outcrop near a massive junk pile. The ship's autopilot systems were reliable enough to land without him at the helm, a feature he was grateful for, considering how often he pushed the craft to its limits. The airlock hissed as it opened, and Eli stepped onto the dusty ground. He wore a well-worn jacket, the patches on its sleeves a tapestry of past jobs and affiliations. A single holster hung low on his hip, containing a pulse pistol that was as unreliable as his shuttle's landing gear. Slinging a satchel over his shoulder, he pulled out a handheld scanner, watching its faintly glowing screen as it emitted a rhythmic beep. The scanner marked his destination a few hundred meters ahead. The long-abandoned Horizon, his old starship. Once a sleek, capable craft that had carried him on daring missions and lucrative jobs, it was now little more than a hollowed-out husk, buried under layers of rust and sand. The Hyperflux Regulator, a rare, high-performance component that was his reason for coming, remained intact, according to the scanner. If he could retrieve it, he'd finally have a chance to repair his shuttle's failing drive systems. "You better still be there," Eli muttered, trudging through the debris-strewn wasteland. He passed mountains of rusting parts, crushed escape pods, and the occasional scavenger skeleton. Kestrin, 7 didn't forgive mistakes. Finally, he saw it. The Horizon, half buried in sand dunes and surrounded by jagged metal. Time and weather hadn't been kind to her. The once polished silver hull was tarnished with rust, the cockpit windows cracked and caked with grime. Eli felt a pang of nostalgia as he approached, running a hand along the hull. "Been a while," he said quietly. Climbing aboard, he entered through the still functional rear hatch. The familiar, albeit decayed, corridors greeted him. His boots echoed in the silence as he made his way toward the engine bay, where the Hyperflux Regulator was housed. Memories tugged at him as he passed the crew quarters and the mess hall, their emptiness a stark contrast to the lively conversations and laughter they once held. He stopped abruptly at the entrance to the engine bay. Something wasn't right. The faint smell of food lingered in the air, a mix of spices and something earthy, like roasted roots. Blankets were draped across the floor, arranged in a makeshift bed. Crates and barrels were stacked in a way that created a semblance of walls, forming a small, impromptu shelter. "What the hell?" Eli muttered. Before he could process the scene, a noise behind him made him whirl around. From the shadows, a figure darted out, holding a jagged piece of scrap metal as a weapon. Eli instinctively reached for his pistol, but stopped when he saw the attacker clearly. It was a slender alien girl, her silvery hair cascading over her shoulders in shimmering waves. Her skin was a pale lavender hue, faintly glowing in the dim light, and her large, violet eyes were wide with panic. She was dressed in patchwork clothing that looked hastily assembled, and her trembling hands held the scrap metal like it was her last line of defense. "Stay back," she hissed, her voice sharp but trembling. Her accent was strange, the galactic common words slightly distorted but understandable. "This is my home. Leave now." Eli raised his hands, trying to appear non-threatening. Whoa, easy there. I'm not here to hurt you." "Liar," she snapped, her grip on the makeshift weapon tightening. "You're here to take it all. Just like the others." "Others?" Eli frowned, glancing around the room. "Look, I don't know what you're talking about. I just came for a part." "Lies," she shouted, her voice cracking. "You won't take it from me." Before Eli could respond, she lunged at him, her movements quick but unrefined. He sidestepped her easily, grabbing her wrist and disarming her with a twist. She gasped, her strength clearly no match for his, and stumbled back, clutching her arm. "Hey!" Eli barked, holding up her weapon and tossing it aside. "I'm not here to fight you, all right? Calm down." The girl backed away, her eyes darting around like a cornered animal. "Please," she whispered, her earlier bravado crumbling. "Just leave me alone." Eli sighed, lowering his hands. "I'm not going to hurt you, but this is my ship." Her eyes widened. "Your ship?" "Yeah," Eli said, gesturing around. "Or it used to be, anyway. The horizon's mine. Has been for years." The girl's expression shifted, confusion mixing with fear. "I didn't know. I thought it was abandoned." "It was," Eli admitted. "But I left something here I need to take back." Her body tensed, and she stepped in front of a nearby crate. "No, you can't take it." Eli frowned. "Take what?" "I'm here for the hyperflux regulator. That's all." She blinked, her panic giving way to cautious curiosity. "The regulator?" Eli nodded. "Yeah, it's part of the engine. High-tech, rare, and worth a lot of credits. But I need it for my shuttle. That's all I came for." The girl hesitated, her gaze flicking between him and the crate. "You're not here to take me?" Eli's brow furrowed. "Take you? Why would I dash?" He stopped as the realization hit him. "Wait, someone's been looking for you, haven't they?" Her silence was answer enough. Eli sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "All right, look. I don't know what kind of trouble you're in, but I'm not part of it. I'll grab my part and leave. You can stay here if you want. Deal?" The girl studied him for a long moment, her eyes narrowing. "If you take the regulator, this ship won't protect me anymore." "Protect you from what?" Eli asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "Them, the ones hunting me." Eli felt a pang of guilt as he realized the gravity of her situation. This wasn't just some squatter. This girl was in serious trouble. "Look, what's your name?" She hesitated again before answering. "Lyra." "Lyra," Eli repeated. "Okay, I'm Eli, and I get it you're scared. But if you let me take the regulator, I can help you. I've got a ship. It's not great, but it's better than hiding out here." Her violet eyes searched his face, weighing his words. "Why would you help me?" Eli shrugged. "Because it's the right thing to do." Lyra didn't look convinced, but she nodded slowly. "Fine, but if you betray me..." "I won't," Eli promised. "Now, let's get out of here before whoever's after you shows up." As the two began dismantling the engine bay, neither noticed the faint red light blinking on the ship's console tracking beacon, silently transmitting their location. Chapter 2. Secrets of the Horizon. The interior of the horizon was dark and filled with the acrid smell of decay. Though it had been abandoned for years, the ship still held traces of its former glory. Faded insignias on the walls, broken terminals flickering faintly, and the hum of dormant systems struggling to come to life. Lyra hovered near Eli as he worked on extracting the hyperflux regulator from the engine bay. Her violet eyes darted nervously around the room, as though expecting someone or something to burst in at any moment. Eli glanced at her occasionally, noticing how she flinched at every creak of the ship's hull. "You're really on edge," he said, his tone casual but probing. Lyra crossed her arms. "Wouldn't you be, if people wanted to kill you?" "Fair point," Eli muttered. He paused, wiping grease from his hands. "You mentioned them. Who exactly are they?" Lyra hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. "Bounty hunters," she said softly. "They've been tracking me for months. I thought I was safe here." Eli leaned against the console, studying her. "Bounty hunters don't usually go after random people. What makes you such a big target?" She hesitated again, visibly debating whether to trust him. Finally, she sighed. "I escaped from a Consortium laboratory." Eli's eyebrows shot up. The Consortium was one of the most powerful organizations in the galaxy, known for its advanced technology and ruthless experiments. "You're saying they were experimenting on you?" "Yes," Lyra said, her voice trembling. "They wanted to use me. My people. We have abilities. Abilities they think can be weaponized." Eli frowned. "Abilities? Like what?" Lyra hesitated, then held out her hand. A faint, ethereal glow surrounded her palm, and the air around it shimmered. Eli felt a strange pressure in his chest, as though gravity itself had shifted slightly. "Whoa," he said, taking a step back. "What is that?" "Energy manipulation," Lyra said. closing her hand. The glow vanished, and the air returned to normal. My species can harness ambient energy and reshape it. The Consortium wanted to turn us into living weapons. Eli let out a low whistle. No wonder they want you back. Lyra nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. If they find me, they'll take me back or kill me. And anyone helping me. Eli straightened, his expression serious. Well, they're not taking you. Not while I'm around. Lyra blinked, her expression softening slightly. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. Eli shrugged. Maybe I've got a soft spot for underdogs. Or maybe I just hate the Consortium. Either way, I'm not letting them win. A dangerous discovery. As Eli worked on disconnecting the regulator, the ship's dormant systems hummed faintly to life. Lyra's ears twitched, and her gaze snapped toward the nearby console. What's that? Eli frowned, following her gaze. Probably just the auxiliary systems kicking in. This ship's been dormant for years. But as the console flickered, a holographic display appeared, projecting lines of alien text interspersed with garbled audio. Eli frowned, stepping closer. That's not normal. Lyra approached cautiously. What is it? Eli tapped a few keys on the console, and the hologram stabilized. It displayed what appeared to be classified data logs, marked with the insignia of the Consortium. What the hell? Eli muttered. These aren't from the Horizon's original systems. Lyra's eyes widened. They must have uploaded them here. To track me. Eli's stomach sank. If the Consortium had used the Horizon as a trap, that meant they'd already been here and they might come back. He accessed the logs, scanning through the files. Most of them were corrupted, but one video file was intact. He played it. The hologram projected the image of a sleek, sterile laboratory. Scientists moved methodically, monitoring a containment chamber where a figure Lyra was restrained, glowing lines of energy coursing through her body. Subject Lyra, 7 demonstrates extraordinary energy manipulation capabilities. A voice narrated coldly. Preliminary tests indicate potential for large-scale weaponization. Full integration into Project Catalyst is scheduled for dash. The recording cut off abruptly. Lyra stared at the hologram, her hands clenched into fists. They never saw me as a person, just a tool. Eli placed a hand on her shoulder. They're not getting you back. Not if I can help it. Before she could respond, a warning blared from the ship systems. The console displayed a flashing alert. Incoming hostiles detected. They found us, Lyra whispered, her face pale. The ambush. Outside the horizon, a squadron of bounty hunters descended on the scrapyard, their hovercrafts kicking up clouds of dust. Eli peered through the cockpit window, his pulse quickening as he counted at least 5 heavily armed mercenaries approaching the ship. Looks like they came prepared, Eli muttered. He turned to Lyra. Stay here. I'll deal with them. No, Lyra said firmly. You can't face them alone. Eli hesitated. I don't want you getting hurt. Lyra stepped forward, her violet eyes blazing. I'm not helpless, Eli. I can help. Eli sighed, nodding reluctantly. All right, let's give them a fight they won't forget. The escape plan. Eli and Lyra quickly devised a plan. While Eli created a distraction, Lyra would use her energy manipulation abilities to disable their ships. Together, they fortified the Horizon's interior, setting traps and using its still functional systems to gain an edge. The bounty hunters breached the ship's entrance, their weapons drawn. Eli ducked behind a console, firing his pulse pistol to draw their attention. Hey, over here, you ugly bastards. The mercenaries charged, but as they entered the engine bay, Lyra unleashed a blast of energy, sending them sprawling. The air crackled with power as she manipulated the ambient energy, creating a barrier that blocked their weapons. Nice work, Eli called, firing another shot that struck one of the mercenaries' weapons, rendering it useless. They're regrouping, Lyra shouted. We need to get out of here. Eli nodded, running to the regulator and yanking it free. Got it. Let's move. The chase. As Eli and Lyra fled the horizon, the bounty hunters gave chase, firing at them with plasma rifles. Eli returned fire, ducking behind debris while Lyra used her abilities to deflect incoming shots. They reached Eli's shuttle, the Iron Warden, just as the bounty hunters closed in. Eli powered up the engines, shouting, Get us in the air, now. Lyra placed her hands on the ship's controls, her energy surging through the systems. The shuttle roared to life, lifting off just as the mercenaries unleashed another volley of fire. The Iron Warden shot into the sky, leaving the bounty hunters behind in a cloud of dust and debris. Lyra slumped into the co-pilot's seat, her energy drained. Are you okay? Eli asked, glancing at her. I'll be fine, she said, her voice weak but determined. But they'll keep coming. Eli set a course for the nearest safe port, his expression grim. Then we'll be ready for them. Chapter 3, The Hunt. The Iron Warden streaked across the void of space, leaving the barren scrapyard of Kestrin, 7 far behind. Inside, Eli adjusted the ship's trajectory, his fingers dancing over the console as he set a course for a nearby asteroid field, a notorious hiding spot but their best shot at losing the bounty hunters. Beside him, Lyra sat in the co-pilot's seat, her pale lavender skin glistening with a faint sheen of sweat. Her energy manipulation during their escape had taken a toll, and she leaned heavily against the console, her violet eyes scanning the monitors for signs of pursuit. Still no sign of them, she said, her voice quiet but steady. Maybe we lost them. Eli snorted. Don't count on it. Bounty hunters don't give up that easily, especially not ones working for the Consortium. Lyra frowned, her gaze dropping to her hands. They won't stop until they have me. I'm putting you in danger. Eli glanced at her, his expression softening. I told you, I'm not leaving you behind. We'll figure this out. Before Lyra could respond, the ship's alarm blared, and the console lit up with warning signals. Eli's heart sank as he saw multiple blips appear on the radar. They found us, he muttered, gripping the controls. Brace yourself. The asteroid field. The bounty hunter's ship sleek, agile interceptors designed for pursuit closed in rapidly. Plasma fire streaked past the Iron Warden as Eli pushed the ship's engines to their limit, diving into the chaotic maze of the asteroid field. We'll never outrun them in this, Lyra said, her voice tight. They're too fast. Then we don't outrun them, Eli said, his jaw tightening. We outsmart them. The Iron Warden weaved through the jagged rocks, its hull groaning as debris scraped against the ship. Eli's years of experience as a pilot shone through as he maneuvered with precision, using the asteroids as cover. The bounty hunters followed closely, their ships darting between the floating rocks like predators on the hunt. Lyra closed her eyes, her hands glowing faintly as she concentrated. The air around her seemed to shimmer, and Eli felt the strange, familiar pressure in his chest. What are you doing? He asked, glancing at her. Creating a diversion, she replied, her voice strained. Ahead of them, a cluster of smaller asteroids suddenly shifted, colliding violently and sending debris flying toward their pursuers. 2 of the bounty hunters' ships were caught in the chaos, their shields failing as the rocks tore through their hulls. Nice work, Eli called, a grin breaking through his tension. Lyra opened her eyes, her glow fading. It won't hold them all. We need a plan. A desperate gamble. Eli scanned the radar, noting the remaining hunters closing in. One ship, larger and more heavily armed than the others, seemed to be coordinating the attack. He guessed it was the command ship. If we can take out their leader, the rest might back off, Eli said, narrowing his eyes. But we'll have to get close. Lyra frowned. Close enough for what? Eli smirked. You'll see. As the Iron Warden darted through the asteroid field, Eli looped back toward the command ship, using the debris for cover. The other hunters hesitated, unsure of his sudden maneuver. The command ship, however, held its ground, firing a barrage of plasma bolts. Hold on, Eli shouted, jerking the controls to avoid the blasts. Lyra braced herself, her eyes widening as the Warden closed the distance. You're insane. Probably, Eli shouted back. Can you hit their engines from here? Lyra hesitated, then nodded. She placed her hands on the console, her energy flaring as she focused on the command ship. The air around her shimmered, and a concentrated pulse of energy shot from the Warden's weapon systems, striking the hunter's engines. The command ship lurched, its engines sputtering as sparks flew. The remaining hunters faltered, their formation breaking as their leader struggled to maintain control. They're retreating, Lyra said, relief flooding her voice. For now, Eli replied, steering the warden out of the asteroid field. But they'll be back. Uncovering the truth. Once they were safely away from the hunters, Eli set the warden on autopilot and slumped into his seat. Lyra sat beside him, her shoulders sagging with exhaustion. We can't keep running like this, she said quietly. They'll find us again. Eli nodded. Which means we need to figure out why they want you so badly. There's got to be more to this than just your abilities. Lyra hesitated, then reached into a pouch on her makeshift belt. She pulled out a small, crystalline device, its surface etched with glowing lines of alien script. What's that? Eli asked, leaning closer. It's a data core, Lyra said. I stole it when I escaped the Consortium. It contains information about their experiments and about me. Eli raised an eyebrow. You've been carrying this the whole time? No wonder they're after you. Lyra nodded. I couldn't leave it behind. It's the only proof of what they've done. Eli took the core, studying it. We need to decrypt this. If we can figure out what's on it, we might have a way to stop them. A new threat. As they discussed their next steps, the warden's comm system crackled to life. A distorted voice filled the cockpit, sending a chill down Eli's spine. Attention, Iron Warden. This is Commander Krex of the Consortium. Surrender the girl, and your life will be spared. Eli exchanged a glance with Lyra, his hand hovering over the controls. Guess they're not giving up that easily. Krex's voice continued, cold and calculating. We've tracked you across the sector. You cannot hide. Hand her over, and this will end quickly. Lyra's hands clenched into fists. I won't go back. Eli grinned, his fingers tightening on the controls. Good, because I'm not letting them take you. The radar lit up with incoming ships, their sleek designs unmistakable. The Consortium wasn't sending bounty hunters this time, they were coming in full force. We've got company, Eli said, his voice steady despite the odds. Time to make a stand. Chapter 4. The Final Stand. The Iron Warden trembled as Eli tightened his grip on the controls, staring at the radar lighting up with Consortium ships. Unlike the bounty hunters, these weren't small, agile fighters, they were heavy, reinforced cruisers equipped with advanced weaponry. The lead vessel, a black dreadnought with glowing red insignias, loomed in the distance like a predator closing in for the kill. 3 cruisers, 1 dreadnought, Eli muttered. Not exactly great odds. Lyra stood beside him, her violet eyes fixed on the display. Despite her exhaustion, she straightened her shoulders and placed a steadying hand on the console. We can't run. They'll chase us wherever we go. I wasn't planning on running, Eli replied, a faint grin tugging at his lips. But if we're going to fight, we'll need a plan. Lyra nodded, her glowing hands already beginning to work the ship systems. What do we have? Eli glanced at the display. Not much. Shields at 62%, plasma cannons at half power, and no secondary weapons. But if we can get close enough, we might be able to use that data core of yours to disrupt their systems. Lyra frowned. The core is encoded. They'd recognize its signal immediately. Eli shrugged. Then we don't use it to communicate. We use it to overload their systems. If I can patch it into their mainframe, it might give us a shot. That's dangerous, Lyra said, her voice hesitant. Eli grinned. Danger's kind of my thing. A daring maneuver. The Consortium cruisers closed in, their weapons charging. Plasma bolts lit up the void, streaking toward the Iron Warden. Eli pushed the ship's engines to their limit, weaving through the incoming fire with practiced precision. Lyra worked furiously at the console, rerouting power to the shields and plotting a trajectory that would bring them close to the dreadnought. If we're going to reach their mainframe, we'll need to dock with their ship. Easier said than done, Eli replied, jerking the controls to avoid another blast. Can you cloak us? Lyra nodded, her glowing hands manipulating the Warden systems. It'll only last for a few minutes, but it should get us close. Do it, Eli said, his voice steady despite the chaos. The ship shimmered as Lyra activated the cloaking field, rendering it invisible to the enemy's sensors. The cruisers hesitated, their weapons firing blindly into the void as the Warden slipped past them and approached the dreadnought. They won't fall for this for long, Lyra said, her voice tense. They won't have to, Eli replied, guiding the ship toward the dreadnought's docking bay. We're almost there. Boarding the dreadnought. The Iron Warden docked with the dreadnought in a flurry of sparks and grinding metal. Eli grabbed his pulse pistol and a small toolkit, glancing at Lyra. Stay here. I'll patch the core into their systems and disable them from the inside. Lyra shook her head. No. You'll need me to keep their security systems off your back? Eli hesitated, then nodded. All right, but stick close. They entered the dreadnought through a maintenance hatch, moving quickly and quietly through its dimly lit corridors. The ship hummed with power, its cold, metallic interior a stark contrast to the chaos outside. As they reached the mainframe chamber, Lyra placed a hand on Eli's arm, her voice barely above a whisper. I sense them. They're close. Let's make this quick, Eli replied, stepping into the chamber. The room was dominated by a massive console, its screens glowing with streams of data. Eli pulled the data core from his satchel and began connecting it to the console, his fingers flying over the controls. Can you access their systems? He asked. Lyra nodded, her glowing hands hovering over the console. I'm in, but they'll notice us any second. As if on cue, the door behind them slammed open, and Commander Krex strode in, flanked by heavily armed soldiers. His cold, reptilian eyes narrowed as he leveled a blaster at Eli. You've caused quite a mess, scavenger, Krex said, his voice icy. Step away from the console. Eli raised his hands, stalling for time. Look, I don't know what you're after, but dash. Silence. Krex snapped, his gaze shifting to Lyra. And you. Did you really think you could escape us? You belong to the Consortium. I belong to no one, Lyra said, her voice defiant. Her hands glowed brighter, and the air around her began to shimmer. Foolish, Krex said, motioning to his soldiers. Take them. The final battle. Before the soldiers could move, Lyra unleashed a wave of energy, sending them sprawling. Krex staggered but managed to fire a shot, narrowly missing her as Eli dove for cover. Nice timing, Eli shouted, firing his pulse pistol at the remaining soldiers. The room erupted into chaos, plasma bolts and bursts of energy lighting up the chamber. Lyra focused on the console, her hands glowing as she poured her energy into the system. Keep them off me. Eli ducked behind a console, taking out another soldier with a well-placed shot. Working on it. Krex snarled, advancing on Lyra. Eli intercepted him, tackling the commander and wrestling his blaster away. Not so tough without your goons, huh? Krex shoved him aside, drawing a blade and lunging at Lyra. Before he could strike, a surge of energy erupted from the console, knocking him backward. It's done. Lyra shouted, her voice strained. We have to go. Eli grabbed her arm, dragging her toward the maintenance hatch as alarms blared throughout the ship. The dreadnought shuddered violently as its systems began to overload. A narrow escape. The Iron Warden detached from the dreadnought just as it erupted in a blinding explosion. The shockwave rocked the ship, but Eli managed to stabilize it, guiding them away from the debris field. Lyra slumped into the co-pilot seat, her breathing heavy. Did it work? Eli nodded, glancing at the display. Their fleet's in disarray. Whatever you did, it scrambled their systems. Lyra smiled faintly, her exhaustion evident. Good. Eli reached over, placing a hand on her shoulder. You did great. So did you, she replied, her eyes meeting his. For the first time, there was a flicker of hope in her gaze. A new beginning. Days later, the Iron Warden drifted in orbit above a quiet, uncharted planet. Eli and Lyra sat in the cockpit, staring out at the endless stars. What now? Lyra asked softly. Eli smiled. Now, we figure out what you want to do. You're free, Lyra. No one's chasing you anymore. Lyra tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. Maybe. I'll figure out what it means to truly live. Eli grinned. Well, wherever you go, I'm coming with you. Lyra's smile widened, and for the first time, she felt like she had a future worth fighting for. Together, they set a course for the unknown, ready to face whatever the galaxy had in store.